welcome back. This is going to be our final episode on our self-care podcast. My name is Jeannie.
And my name is James. Welcome.
Welcome back. I hope that you've been able to stay along with us through this journey. I know self-care is a topic that many people struggle with. I know that to be human is to struggle with self-care. I don't know many people that get it perfectly. That's for sure. I actually had someone write in on our Facebook page the other day and said, how in the world? So they said chaplains are good at teaching discipline. They're good at teaching other things, but most of them are bad at self-care. What do we do about that? And I thought, wow, that is a big question.
Yeah, that's definitely not something that you want to fall into the category of do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, because if we burn out, I always tell the chaplains at International Fellowship of Chaplains, I say, if you burn out before your time, then how many people are missing out on what it is that you have to offer them? It isn't just about ourselves, but it's also about those that God calls us to love and to serve and to bring our gifts to.
Yes, absolutely. So take care of yourselves. That's why we did this podcast, okay? That was my fatherly advice. So Anyway, so we're just going to kind of recap a little bit what we've learned over the last several weeks, because it's almost, to me anyway, it's almost been like we've been trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose going full blast. Been so much information. One of the things that on one of our I think it was our very first podcast on this series was the fact that Gen Z. My heart goes more out to that generation more and more, because they seem to be the generation, or they seem to be the segment of society that has the worst time with self-care. And I think a lot of it has to do with, dare I say, social media. I mean, I've never seen social media that makes you antisocial, which is, what it can do. But all the pressure from the post and their friends, air quote, it puts so much pressure on them that they just, they break down. Break down emotionally. Sometimes they even break down physically. So
absolutely.
Did you have anything to add to the Gen Zer? Because you have one at home.
Yes, I do. And they actually were coined the loneliest generation.
Yes.
And that it does make me sad. So if you are a Gen Z and you're watching this, or you have a Gen Z child, grandchild, one of the things I would encourage you to do is just, one of our people here did a teaching on Gen Z, Generation Z. And they said that one of the things when they did the statistics and they polled a large group of Gen Z, they said the number one thing that they want from the older generation is to be invited over for dinner.
Wow.
And I thought, you wouldn't think that was the number one thing they wanted.
No, that's just a given, I would think. But
yeah, but they are, so if you know a Gen Z and you're like, well, how can I help this person who is, coined the loneliest generation? Invite them to dinner, invite them over and, sit around the table and just chit chat with them, or, socially, even if they seem, and this is not a pun on them, but if they seem socially awkward, it's because, you got to think they've been raised in the generation of, like you said, social media, where everything is on a device, all of their interactions, even school now. A lot of schools are done on devices. Yeah,
they're doing them on like iPads and stuff like that. The traditional textbook has just kind of faded away.
They don't even have to know what it feels like to open a real book. So invite them over for dinner. Take them to dinner. Just things that you think are just ordinary, that might be something that would help them to kind of break that isolation and to teach them the social skills of being able to sit down at a family. Our generation learned what it was like to have social skills sitting around a kitchen table.
Yes.
Or, inviting over friends, and you had to learn social norms and all those things. This is something that this generation, more than any other, has been depleted of.
And that actually reminds me, I remember Sunday afternoon lunches at my grandparents' house, and at times there might have been 22, 25, 26 of us, and cousins and aunts and uncles, and you would learn to have 5 conversations with 5 people at the same time and be able to keep track with all of them. And again, another kind of a lost art, if you will, or a lost skill with Gen Zers.
I think COVID brought a lot of that back too.
Yeah.
That was really a good takeaway from us being isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Was people, you couldn't find board games at the store anymore because people were buying board games and they were learning to do what families did back in the day.
Yeah.
And so that would be my takeaway.
Yep.
Invite a Gen Z over for dinner. That is the assignment for Gen Z self-care.
And doing that, actually, what does this got to do with self-care? It has a lot to do with it. Mm-hmm. It has a lot to do with the Gen Zers, especially, again, not picking on y'all.
No.
But again, the loneliest generation. Well, how can we fix that? Make them not lonely. Socialize with them. Absolutely.
Yeah, teach them.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that I learned from our first episode of this was the prescription drugs and the fact that more and more people are turning to drugs. Mm-hmm. We'll say prescription drugs to help combat the loneliness, the depression, psychotropic drugs. It's almost like that is their form of self-care. And it's sad because all that's doing is putting a Band-Aid on something that's going to fester and show up again.
But I think it's also, and we do want to leave a note, just like we did on that podcast, that, there's nothing wrong with taking something for depression, anxiety, things like that. But make sure that it's something that you're actually dealing with in other ways too, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Is not just take the meds and think, well, then I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good now.
And sometimes, we need the medication long term. Sometimes people need to take it forever.
Right.
But sometimes it's just something that, like you said, not used as a Band-Aid, that we can take it for a little while to get balanced, to figure out what's underneath.
Yes.
And, so that's so very important.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah, I think in that very same podcast, I described self-care as a three-legged stool.
Oh, yes.
And if you don't know, so self-care is we're talking about taking care of our bodies, our spirits, and our souls. And our souls are comprised of our mind and our will and emotions. So if you can imagine a stool that has three legs, as long as all three legs are there, then that stool's not going to fall over.
Yes.
But if you take away one of those, even just one of those legs, it's going to topple over. So the point being that you have to take care of all three parts of us as human beings.
Absolutely.
Because if you only take care of two, and Lord forbid you only take care of one or none, your stool's going to topple.
Yes, absolutely. That's true. That's correct. Do you remember being in school and having somebody pull your chair out from behind you?
Oh, yeah.
And sit down.
Yeah.
That just popped in my head.
To
those guys that did that back in the day, that was not very nice.
No, and we still remember you. So, the second podcast episode, you talked to a very beautiful soul by the name of Gail, and she was talking about self-care for the soul. And I think a couple of things that she said really stuck out, because again, your soul is your mind and your will and emotions. Yes. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, and then I'll let you take it from there, is don't let your emotions, the emotional side of your soul, overtake and control your mind. And that kind of stuck out to me, like, wow, you have to have a balance there.
Oh, absolutely. And, that reminds me, especially and I don't want to pick on females. We've already picked on Gen Z a little bit, but females are more emotionally led than males by nature because of hormones and things like that. And so quite frequently, I will say something to my husband. I'll say, but I feel this way. And he'll say, well, since when are feelings the truth? Feelings can be liars. And and exactly. It's like, well, in that moment, I still feel that way, but I have to balance it with truth.
Yes.
And one of the things Gail talked about during that was one of the ways we do that is by finding someone that we can talk to.
Yes.
And having an accountability persons, and I'll use plural, more than one.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to burn one person out.
No.
Right. And that could be a healthcare professional. That can be someone that you go to on a regular basis, a trusted friend or source, somebody that can be honest with you, like my husband is, that says, well, but are your feelings telling you the truth?
Not afraid to rough you up a little bit if it's necessary. That's the kind of person we're talking about.
That's the kind of friend you need, not somebody that's just going to pat you on the back and say,
poor you.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's tough. No, but but let's talk this out, because a lot of times, especially people like me, I'm an external processor, which means, and I know many of you out there are external processors, which means sometimes you don't know how you feel till it comes out of your mouth.
Right.
And you may have all the feelings, but talking to somebody helps process that. Yeah. And sometimes helps you to know where you are. Yeah. Whereas like my husband is an internal processor.
Yes.
And many times if I demand him to tell me how you feel, then I'm going to get mumbo jumbo because he don't know yet, because he hasn't sat and processed it. So there are different personalities, and you have to find what works for you. But I would like to say that every one of us were created to need that human interaction where we're able to share our emotions, we're able to share our processes, right, internal or external.
Right.
And we're able to deal with them. So I thought that was a huge takeaway from Gail's episode.
Yeah, and something just popped into my mind. There was a series, I don't even know if